Well, good evening. Thank you to everyone for coming. Really appreciate your attendance here this evening. Your input is going to be invaluable to us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brent Mcgovern. I'm the Commissioner of Utilities and Infrastructure with the City of St. John, and I'll have the pleasure of emceeing some of this evening's event. And so, without further ado, I'd like to ask Your Worship, Mayor Node Reardon, to come up and kick things off. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to leave this mask on. So I'd like to start first with a land acknowledgement. The City of St. John, Menakwi, is situated in the traditional territory of the Maliseet. The Maliseet, along with their indigenous neighbors, the Mi'kmaq and the Pesto Tomokati, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s that protected their rights to lands and resources. So welcome everyone this evening. I'd like to also recognize that here with me tonight is Councillor Gary Sullivan, the Deputy John McKenzie, Jerry Lowe is here, Councillor Lowe is here, Councillor Hickey is here, and of course there's lots of staff here. The City Manager is here this evening as well. We're excited to be here tonight and to bring these initial drawings of the project. We're going to have shovels in the ground. We're looking for feedback, obviously. We're going to have shovels in the ground this fall. We're hoping to have the project ready by summer of 2022, so next summer. This is going to be a transformational project, obviously, for the Uptown area. And the last time I believe this was done over was in 1983. And at that time, I believe Princess Diana and Prince Charles cut the ribbon for that. So this time I'm hoping to have that job. Anyways, so it's been a long time, 38 years since that's been rejuvenated. I'd like to recognize both the federal and the provincial governments who have both committed funds for this important project, and this is going to be a catalyst for the Uptown area. We'll also have the opportunity to review the initial designs for the neighboring Fundy Key project. So now I would like to introduce our MP from St. John Rothsay, Mr. Wayne Long. Wayne, there you are.
Good evening. How exciting is this? I don't want to date myself, but I can remember as a student walking to catch the bus from high school, cutting through here, and looked up at this old dilapidated building, Market Square, and the windows were all broken out of it, and it was literally falling apart. And I remember with excitement how, when it was revitalized and reopened, and the boardwalk was opened, and, the tugboat was over there, and thousands of people would come down to the boardwalk. It was a hub. It was a place where the community met, the community had fun, celebrated, and the community came together. And, fast forward till now, we still have always loved our boardwalk and Market Slip and the whole area, but I think we've all known over the past several years that it needed a new vision, it needed a makeover, a refresh, a reboot. So this is a perfect example of 3 levels of government: our city, the province, the federal government, partnering with great local proponents and entrepreneurs like Dr. David Elias and his family, working together unified to do great things for our community. And this will be a transformational part of St. John's resurgence. Make no mistake about that. When we redo this and we continue right down the waterfront, and as you know, we announced a container village project that's going to be right up beside the port. We have some of the best waterfront real estate in North America. And finally, we are going to realize the massive tourism potential, economic potential, and just, community gathering potential that this will have. So I thank you for letting me speak. I want to congratulate certainly the city, Envision St. John, Brent, and everybody involved. And this is a great day, make no mistake about it, and we've got a lot more to come. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Long. No representatives from the province were able to make it this evening, but we did get a number of notes from ministers' offices as well as the Premier's office wishing us well this evening and wishing that we have a successful event. So we are excited this evening to publicly unveil the conceptual designs for the public space along the waterfront for the first time. These designs reflect the input provided to us by the public, a number of you who are here again this evening, as well as a number of new faces that I see. Our initial event was held in April of this year to engage on this topic and to provide key input into the design. That input is input that you'll see on these boards around us this evening. Tonight's event is meant to both be informative and engaging. Both the city and the private sector developer will be sharing the design work for Fundy Quay and the waterfront public spaces and will be available for discussion following the presentations this evening. The City of St. John will also be looking for your feedback. We're wondering if we're hitting the mark with the designs that you're seeing before you this evening. There'll be opportunities for discussion built into the sessions this evening, and I encourage all of you to share your ideas. If there is anything that you'd like to share following the event, we do have an email address, and you'll see that up on the screen. It is, we'll display it a number of times tonight, but it is feedback@stjohn.ca. So again, feedback@stjohn.ca. The Fundy Quay project is comprised of both the public sector and private sector improvements and development. And at first, I'd like to speak about the private sector development of this project. The public sector. The public sector infrastructure projects focus on three things: protecting the coastline from future impacts on sea level rise, and repairing and raising the seawall at Fundy Quay. Also preparing the Fundy Quay development site by raising it and addressing soil remediation in the process, as well as extending public access along the waterfront. The extension of the public access along the waterfront includes a number of items. The re-imaging of the public space out here on Market Slip area, the extension of Harbour Passage, and the construction of the pedway connection between Market Square and the Fundy Quay. Many of these project components are in the final stages. There is public infrastructure construction underway at this time, as many of you would have seen, out, along the seawall area, where its work is underway, and I'm happy to report on schedule as well. However, tonight we really want to hear your thoughts. Your feedback on the conceptual design of the public space is important to us. You'll have an exciting presentation from our landscape architect, who's here with us this evening, as well as a number of his team members. And then we'll have the opportunity to have some one-on-one sessions, as well as an opportunity to ask some questions. So the point that I do want to emphasize in terms of managing expectations is that the design before you this evening has a number of large components. We can't afford all of them. Again, we can't afford all of them, but we want your input. That's where your input is very valuable to us. We want to understand what components we should really keep as we move into the construction phase, what components we may be able to modify and tweak. Now that I've touched on the public sector component, I'd like to switch to the private sector investment, known as Fundy Quay, that will be happening next door at the public space. This is a large private sector development that will be undertaken in a phased approach by Fundy Harbour Group. This evening, I'm happy to say that Chris Elias from the Fundy Harbor Group is going to provide us with an overview of the initial concepts of that development. And with that, I'd invite Chris to come up and share his presentation with us. Thank you.
So thank you for the introduction, Brent. And similarly, we'd like to thank all the levels of government that have also contributed to this project on the public space. And we're very excited to be part of what we feel is a very transformative project for St. John, and that really has the ability to add a lot of vibrancy and density and capitalize on a lot of the momentum that we're seeing in the St. John market right now. And I'd like to especially thank the mayor and council for their support throughout the project. This has been in the works for over 2 years now, and there's a long way to go still, but I'm confident we'll get there with their support. And the city's development team as well, specifically planning and infrastructure and building and permitting. They've been a great resource to us as we work through the process, so thank you. Now we'll get into some of the massing, which I'm sure this is the first time we've shared these publicly, and just to kind of talk through and get everyone oriented. This is a site plan, an overhead view of the Fundy Quay site with Market Slip at the top here, and it shows the division where Harbor Passage is going to wrap around the site and connect to the container village that Wayne Long had mentioned. That's going to be on the cruise ship terminal site. In terms of design rationale, what we were trying to achieve here with our architects is a few different things. We've concentrated the access to the middle of the site to take it away from the two intersections on Water Street, so King and Princess. And in doing so, it gave us the ability to concentrate all of the parking, which is going to be above ground, contained within the buildings, to the interior of the site. And what that does is it really opens up the perimeter of the site so that there's a seamless transition between the public space and the private space. So we've got a buffer here to allow for retail patios and restaurants and all sorts of different commercial retail uses on the ground floor that are going to connect the site with the public space so that it's fully integrated, and also activate the waterfront from both the public and private side, similar to what we've seen recently in Halifax with the reinvigoration of their boardwalk. We're looking to do the same thing by providing all of the ground floor uses as commercial retail to really make it accessible to the public. And we've also, in positioning the buildings in this way, it's in keeping with the density that we're trying to achieve, and we're doing that by keeping the tallest building, which is similar height to, say, the City Hall building or Brunswick Square, not out of we're keeping that closest to that King Street intersection, and then everything, as you'll see, is tiered down towards the water, just to preserve a lot of those sight lines, and it's kind of attentive to shade and keeping a lot of natural light on Market Slip itself. And what we've also been able to achieve with this design is addressing both private and public parking needs by providing for public parking, angled parking along Water Street here, as well as surface parking in the interior of the site. And then importantly, we've got amongst these primarily residential buildings with ground floor retail, we've got provisions for a community cultural building and some green public space around that to allow, to keep that corner of the site soft-scaped and to keep it in keeping with the rest of the Harbor Passage design. So now I'll go on to some more detailed renderings. So this would be from the southeast view looking towards the city. And you'll notice as we are still in the early conceptual phases. This southeast building, which is going to be the first building, is a little more developed from a design perspective, but the intention here is just to show the height and overall footprints of the site. And again, part of the importance here is to really, this was labeled as one of the 3 big moves in St. John's uptown plan, and part of that is trying to attract a lot of density to this area to really make this a vibrant part of our community and bring as much potential commercial and retail activity as we can. So this would be from Market Square looking across, and as Commissioner McGovern had mentioned, the seawalls being elevated by about 2 meters to protect against what the potential storm surge water level is in the year 2100. So all our bases are covered there for the next 80 years or so. And we've also done a similar treatment on the Water Street side by elevating the retail about 1 meter above Water Street to allow for similar protection. So this would be from King Street intersection looking out at the development. And you can start to see here some of the detail and thoughtfulness that's gone in to the first building. So our architects, Leiden Lynch out of Halifax, really, it was front of mind to keep this very in keeping with the feel of Water Street and the properties across the street. So they've achieved that by keeping this podium level to the same height that the buildings across the street are, and then stepping that back before we get into this smaller tower structure. And they've also broken up the facade of the building just from a pedestrian scale to make that feel, it pays a bit of tribute to our existing architecture on Water Street and in St. John. And then I think this one really does a good job of showing, what that activation is going to look like on the ground floor, and how we're trying to really make a very fluid transition here between what is Harbor Passage and the future retail and commercial space on the ground floor here. And this just shows a pedestrian scale from Water Street. So yeah, that is those are all our images for now, but as we're still in the progress here, you can follow along with us on our website at fundyharbor.com, and we will be releasing some more information as we work through the approvals process and continue to do that in conjunction with the city. But for now, just want to thank you all for coming, and thank the city and the province and the federal government once again for their contributions on this project. And we're very excited to be working with this team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you again to the entire Fundy Harbor group and Dr. Elias, who's here, as well as a number of team members. That's really exciting stuff, isn't it? Very happy to see such a great development going to happen in St. John. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dan Glenn, of the Glenn Group, Landscape Architects and Planners. And Dan is the design lead for the public space projects that we're undertaking. And Dan has more than 40 years experience in leading landscape design, and has led the design for much of the St. John waterfront that you see now, including Harbor Passage. So with that, Dan, if you could come up and walk us through your presentation, that'd be great. Thanks.
Well, thanks for the great turnout, especially under these conditions. And Chris, really exciting presentation. A lot of that's come together in the last week as we've been exchanging files, and it's really wonderful to see. So tonight we're going to walk you through the design in a little more detail than you see on the panels. And we're going to do this, maybe we'll just start with this. So First thing I'll say is we started this project in March, and the design has been evolving ever since. So it's really been a collaborative effort, probably the most collaborative effort we've ever had on a project. This group meets like every 2 weeks. So the design has really been evolving. Our team is made up of some local firms here, and it's a big team. It covers many disciplines. It's just staggering what you need to do a great job with all the considerations that are needed for a space like this. So you've probably seen some construction activity, right across the way here with the raising of the seawall. So, we're well underway. So, it's not like where we were in 2013 and 2015 where it was a dream. Things have started, money's in place. So this is what you've told us. And I'm going to step off the stage where I can see the screen a little better and just talk to you a little bit about, so what people said to us is that we need to open up this space, that since '82 it just keeps getting filled with things, and it's really now hard to see the water. The city's lost that connection from King Street down to Market Slip. And if you look at the old photographs, Harold Wright has these incredible photographs of what King Street used to look like with the tall ships that came right up to Water Street. And you'll see through some of these slides the fact that this slip has changed over the years, where it's been infilled and dredged, and just like the tide that comes in and out, the slip seems to come in and out. Oh, maybe back, if you don't mind, Blake. So one of the things you said is declutter. Take away some of the stuff that's there. It's really not in our best interest, and please be forward-thinking. Not everything has to be about the past, even though it's a proud and a historical city. Let's look forward, and let's start with changing the name of that public space out there. And let's have a lot of variety and a lot of flexibility, because we really don't know what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years. So let's make sure we don't fill every spot with something. Let's have that ability to be flexible. And let's think about all the seasons. Right now it's primarily a summer, fall, spring type of place. What about the winter? So put something in for us to do in the winter. And make sure that it's comfortable for everybody. And really we don't need anything that's incredibly fancy. We just want to go somewhere by the water and chill. That's what people said. But they do want it to be more green. They want to have a more comfortable balance between the hard urban, what we call fabric or buildings, concrete, and the soft living elements. And of course, be concerned about universal access and active transportation so that everybody can get access to this wonderful waterfront opportunity. And let's accommodate larger groups. Right now it seems that only small groups can collect. And let's have somewhat of a distinctive look from Harbor Passage, connected, but something that identifies this as this special place. And let's make sure we unite Harbor Passage and the city's heritage at this location, where you can both speak to today and yesterday in the same space. So we've had lots of consultations about this every 2 weeks, like I said, with city staff, a design committee, stakeholders, government officials, the boardwalk businesses, council, developers, and we've reviewed the feedback from 2013 and 2015 as well. And we also had, as was mentioned, a virtual public meeting, which was a great public meeting in April, where a lot of ideas were put out there. We're also following the strategic initiatives that the city has in place so that we mesh with in the same direction that the city wants to head. So we refer to this project in our office as Harbor Passage the prequel, because we always imagined that Harbor Passage started at this spot. Even though it was it was the first phase of Harbor Passage was down past the hotel, we always thought this was the starting point. So because this is the prequel, we're going to do this presentation in reverse order. Normally what we do is we build up slowly our analysis, our assessment, and lead you through to the design conclusions. But tonight we're going to jump right into the design. You've already seen some of it here. And then we're going to go through the rationale as to why these decisions were made to get us to this concept level. And hopefully you'll have a deeper understanding of the type of decisions we've had to make so far and how you can influence us going forward. So this is the concept plan for both the public space outside as well as Harbor Passage, which is the red line, the Cranberry Trail that leads from the Hilton here, winds its way through, and to Water Street. And this was a conscious effort on our part to make sure that Harbor Passage got to the water, because that's what the waterfront trail is supposed to be. So we've moved right to the water with that concept. Some of the features here, some people are wondering, what are you talking about? These islands, what are they? What we've been looking at is the space between the water and the land has been changing. And so we've looked to the islands as something that creates a nice integration with the street and the public space without blocking it all off, so that you move through the islands and into the square. The idea as well is to keep the space open so that in the air you can see that the slip and the plaza actually are one, that they move in and out and they maintain that historic relationship of that open space to King Street. We've showed a potential pedway connection that would lead from this second story at the library, out through the windows, over across the slip, and to the new buildings at Fundy Key that Chris was showing you. We've looked at how to have a better integration out going down to the slip. If you're here during all stages of the tide, you'll see people clambering over that rock to get down to the sand or to get down to the water. So we've looked at ways to make that transition easier and safer. And yes, it may mean that at times you'll have to go in and clean out what the harbor brings in, but it's worth it because it's a special place, and no other place in the world can you get these high tides and have this interaction with an urban street. So this is a phenomenal opportunity, and so we've looked at it as a key development project. Yeah, let's move on, Blake. So we're going to start the tour of this concept right outside here, as if you've come out of the hotel, and we're going to work our way towards where we are now today. So walking down the boardwalk, you can see the state of the boardwalk. It's basically beyond its life cycle, and if you go under and check the wood there, it's all rotting. I mean, there is a life cycle to everything, and it's time to replenish this one. So we're going to work our way down. So this is the new design, what it might look like with a railing that's a little more nautical, not quite as mechanical or institutional. And this is what we've labeled the promenade, and we see it as kind of a romantic walk. You're maybe out at the restaurant or you're having a nice dinner, and then you can walk along the slip and move Harbor Passage to the outside here, where the traffic is a little faster moving, and have this great experience with the waterfront. This is a view of what that could look like. So if you go out there now and take a look, you see an asphalt road. So we're going to turn that into a pedestrian space, still allow service vehicles to use that for access for safety, but create two streams of movement. This is a view looking over, so that's what the rock currently looks like. And you can see from the marks on the rock where the extreme high tide is, medium tide, and then not quite low tide here. And the new design responds to all of that by bringing those lines to life in what we refer to as the ripple. And you'll see this ripple pattern happening from the water with the rock and also the paving pattern that works its way up through the plaza. Here we're also looking at what we call the shoals on the left and right, where we're introducing some green material here that can survive in that environment and soften that appearance. And we also have what we refer to as the Terrace Beaches. So here's where we'll take that volleyball sand and we'll use it as a place to go and lay on the beach, basically, in a small area. And we also have incorporated all different types of seating here, a little cafe seating on the left, and some unique seating on the right as well. Overhead, you'll see a proposed pedway, and it provides shelter underneath, and also some traffic calming techniques that we've used with Harbor Passage as it winds around and slows the traffic, and then it also intertwines with the pedway. And then on the edges, we've incorporated recycling the granite cobbles that are out here now currently, and using them as kind of a rumble strip or a warning strip that there might be faster moving traffic. Because if you've been out on Harbor Passage, you know sometimes the bicycles are going quick or the skateboarders are going quick. So it's nice to know that you're moving into that traffic. So here we're going to leave this door, and we're going to replace the pavers that are out there from that crumbling red clay to concrete pavers. And as we work our way to what we call the rock pool, which is an introduction and playful area for water. So it could be something the kids could go and play in the water as it's programmed to squirt up a little bit. Have a nice show at night, so it animates the space, and it also interprets some of the features that happen here at the waterfront. This is a view of what it might look like from a pedway up here, so you get a nice view looking out over the market slip and also into the square space and the stage. If you go out the door right now and look to immediate left, you'll see this space. So it's kind of a forgotten space. And we thought, what can we do with that? Well, how about making a better connection between the outside with the library? And so we've looked at creating a little area here we call the Book Nook, but it's just a place where you can do outdoor programming with the library. Take that library outside, use the resources that are here to clean this sort of corner up, make it more usable. Okay. Where are we headed now? We're headed out to the patios. So what we've looked at here is dealing with one of the other things that you told us to do is deal with the microclimate. St. John has, this cold fog that comes in and there are winds, and we need more shelter. And so we've looked at a system that we can tidy up the present patios out there so that we have a more uniform look. They can still have their own identity, but it doesn't have to be kind of, old wood stuff that's hard on these slopes, and it's a difficult area. So we've looked at a series of enclosures that would go out 6 meters, 20 feet from the building. In this case, providing some glass shelters that can be opened and closed, and I'll show you more about these later on in the presentation. And then the patios extending out to about where they are now, into that area outside. At nighttime, we see this as a great opportunity, introducing new materials and a more, I think, inviting atmosphere for people to want to come and spend time in this plaza. One of the things you'll see here, like this McGill sign, playing with the rock. So one of the things about this city, as you know, incredible rock formations, and so we're using that in the design, and I'll talk about that at the second half of the presentation. The stage. So the stage that you see out here now is a wood stage that's kind of been cobbled together, and if you've ever looked underneath it, you would go, it's going to come down any time. I mean, it doesn't look like a great performance area, and it's too close. Not everybody can enjoy it. So what we've looked at doing is moving that stage back and making it accessible to a lot more people, and also enhancing it in a design way so that everyone has an opportunity to enjoy that, especially for large performances. So right now we're going to do a little walk through, going down the right side from King Street, down, you see the patios, the stage on the left, and then we're going to go back up and go down on the left side here where we see provision for potential food trucks or other types of market vendors that might come in. And you're starting to see these islands. The whiter area is the skating rink that's proposed. So this is an oval with a little bit more of a pad in the middle. And you'll see some images of that at night as well. Also, the islands are places that have lawn, planting. They have seating edges, seating platforms that can be used for small performances or just lying about or selling wares, and incorporating the idea of rock in some of the corners. And basically a little oasis that can create a more intimate atmosphere in this bigger space. But still the views are all the way down. One idea is a beer garden that's been out here for a couple of years now, and it's been quite successful. So it's also a place that could continue to house that type of function. So in winter, we think it could be a great atmosphere. If you've been out to Rosse Common, we did a similar type of rink out there a few years ago where there is a little bit of a loop and then there's a big pad. Well, this one has primarily just a loop. But incorporated with it, there's thematic sound and lights to really bring this alive throughout the winter. We talked about the vendors, and then also we see this as a seamless interaction with the Fundy building, so that you could just walk right over to those buildings, and there might be a restaurant over there or another facility, so that both sides of the square have this openness about them. From Water Street on this left-hand side, we've called this area, and we just call it a term in design for us, LA, which is basically a tree-lined walk. So this leads you right down to the other side of the slip. And one of the reasons why we looked at doing this type of alignment, it brings back for us that if you look at the old photographs and see the tall ships lined up, so the lights look like masts, they line up along there, so do the trees. So they symbolize that border that was always there along that slip. Within that, there are also some interpretive elements. And back of the stage is really also the front of the stage. So the stage opens up to the Fundy area as well. What you're seeing here is just a curtain that's closed for some protection from the wind, but it can open up and you can have an almost 360-degree performance. So this is also a public washroom and also our main mechanical and electrical room and greenhouse for the performers. Green room, sorry. Interpretations. So people like to learn about St. John because it has such an interesting history and such an interesting environment. So our design is really laden with a number of interpretive elements, some combined with wayfinding elements, and some maybe just signs or messages, and you'll see that throughout the design. If you're wondering, maybe back up, Blake, if you're wondering what those orange peel-looking things are, this is an idea for a seating on the lawn inspired by the seashells. I think it's the jelly shell, isn't the one in particular? But it's a really interesting way. You can imagine two people sitting in opposite directions having a conversation. So they're on the lawn, but they're not dealing with that wet grass that you'll probably get from the fog. This is what it currently looks like. So this is where Harbor Passage is going to run right along the raised seawall. So this is what it looks like now, and you can see the views. This is what's proposed. So this thing here we actually call the table for two, and it's just a nice little intimate covered spot where you could go and have a conversation or perhaps bring your meal, charge your phone, and look over the slip. As you head your way out, there's something we call the prow, and this is an elevated deck that's sloped, kind of like the prow on a boat. And we're basically hearkening sort of to the tall ship era or any type of boat, but it's an interpretive element underneath with stories, and then above, a way to get above the rail and get some unobstructed views out to Partridge Island or over to Fort Latour, or to get a good view up toward the Reversing Falls. At night, a special element that you can see from inside the plaza, also helpful for wayfinding when you're coming down Harbor Passage and you see that sort of turning point. So here it is as we're going around the Fundy Key place, and on the left, as Chris said, planning for some sort of a cultural building perhaps. And then here we're starting to introduce a combination of hard and soft spaces with planting, and I'm sure you'll be happy to see this disappear. And developing elevated, we call this the Amphitheater. Now it could be a spot for small performances, but it's a great spot just to sit and have a look at the activity that's going on across the way. There's a lot of activity over there looking at the container port and seeing the cruise ships come in. And here's a view of that from the air. So Harbor Passage is running along here with pavers on either side, and in some places the recycled granite cobble pavers. So now we're going to head down to the pilot slip, or as some people call it, Pugsley Slip. And down at this point, some sheltered seating areas. There was a quick view of what it actually looked like. And then we're heading down here where there are some nooks. So you've got these sort of inspired swings that harken to kind of the structures that used to areas where you dried fish. But here we'll reveal the stories about ferries and about the fishing in the harbor. So here are some views. And you'll notice right now that we haven't shown any detail between Harbor Passage and the Fundy Quay buildings, but that will all be integrated and feel like one space at that level. So that was the design that you're seeing here on the boards. And now I'm going to go through and just sort of tell you how we got there. And I'll try not to be repetitive with that. So we refer to it as the design narrative. So let's start here, Blake. So one of the things we found the design on, or what we think are the three foundations in St. John, which is obviously the water, and the fact that you have this incredible tide and place where the confluence of fresh water and salt water meet, and that brackish water continuing all the way up to Fredericton. You know this. The fact that you have this incredible history here and the geology, that it should be the foundation. So one of the things that we've done is we've looked at the, in this area, the rock formation goes out on this angle like this, and so our paving pattern follows that. So basically our design is founded on the foundation of the rock here and the way the tide comes in and out. And then thirdly, it's the people. So what do the people want to do here, and what have they done here, for 12,000 years, basically. So in terms of the water, the design reflects the fact that there's been this shipbuilding industry and the tall ships, that there's both fresh and salt water and the life that comes here, that it's a meeting place of those two water sources, that water actually shapes the land. So, we have the islands out there at the Reversing Falls. You have Partridge Island, you have Navy Island, you have these elements, and that's why we've incorporated the islands into the design, because it's an important part of the experience of being here in the harbor. But also the land shapes us. So that if you ever looked at a geology map, hardly any city is as complicated as St. John in terms of the degree and the diversity of rock that's here, hence the stone hammer development. So we think that's important to bring out. And also some of these shapes. You can see here the stridation in or stratification of the rock formations. So we're trying to emulate some of those patterns in the design. But also the people, have come from, you can see the shipping connections around the world that were connected to St. John and still to this day. So it's important to realize that a lot of St. John was built on this ballast, these rocks that used to keep the boats afloat. That material came here and then deposited, and it became the first infill material in the harbor and developed these slips, from this ballast stone. So this idea of stone is important to us. Hence the use of the granite cobbles and some of the stone treatments that we have out there. Also the dredging of the harbor. and also the Great Fire. And if you look at some of the buildings, and as you can see here, we know some of the buildings are founded on rock, and we know in places the streets were excavated, in some cases 30 feet of rock, in order to get streets. You know, this is really a difficult place to develop here in St. John hundreds of years ago, but you stuck with it, and it really becomes evident when you start digging holes down here in this area, and you see the layers of ballast rock, the debris from the Great Fire, the muck that came in terms of the interaction with the water, and how deep you have to go to get a solid foundation with piles. It's an incredible working excavation of what it takes to build in this area. Accessibility, there were a lot of questions about accessibility today, and so we wanted to bring this up as a special slide and let you know that we're improving all the slopes that are out in the space so that the site is probably 99% accessible. There are a few spots where there will continue to be short staircases, but there will always be a close way around that. So the ramp that's out here will be staying. Some are the sloped walks. Their degree of slope will be reduced so that it's easier. Harbor Passage will be a very gradual journey along the water, accessible for everybody. And also active transportation, to have more people rolling, biking, and using this space. So having the Harbor Passage wide enough and to make it comfortable without having conflicts with pedestrians, having that become a very interactive space. Harbor Passage itself, like I said, coming along the waterfront, but on the land side, creating also pockets for plazas. And the material will be the same as what you find on these first few phases of Harbor Passage, where it's the red asphalt. And some people swear it's actually red rubber, because they tell me my knees feel so much better with that. But it's an illusion. It's asphalt with a coating, but people really have admired it. Here you see all these green areas, so creating that green edge, same sort of treatment as what you see on Water Street with a lot of the perennials, so especially late in the summer, a lot of flower, which is really flowering plants, which is really important for the cruise ship industry, which happens later in the year to have, you know, a big impact then, but also something that looks good all seasons, and especially going into the fall. It's important in places, and we know the species that thrive here in this environment, and it is a difficult one, but it can be green. This is a map showing all of the interpretive stories, and you can see there's all kinds of them, and I'm not going to go into them all, but from the stories that talk about where the ferries were to Navy Island, some of the legends, and I think you're a little ahead of me there, Blake. And okay, so we'll go on. Okay, so thanks. So also one of the things we've identified, and I'm going to go up here to show it. So I think it's an important part of the history. You know, everybody's familiar with Market Slip and Pugsley Slip, but did you know there was a slip here and there was a slip here? And if you look on the old maps in St. John, you'll see the slips were everywhere along the harbor. And so while we can't come in and redig that, because Chris wants to put some buildings up there, we can identify it so that you can understand what this environment looked like, you know, for 150 years or so. The islands, then we see those as accessible in some areas, and also including a benched edge. And in that, we'd like to tell an interpretive story. And the one we're showing here graphically is this idea of foundation, and then the things that the water brings in, and then the wave action above that. We did meet with some First Nations people, and we're hoping to collaborate with them more fully to maybe include some messages and theming that would be appropriate to their interpretation and understanding of this environment. And also the paving materials. So I talked about when we looked at the rock grays, so we would see, instead of the red that's out there now, something that's more of a gray that looks like the granite. That's been an important part of the city street work and sidewalks for years. And if you go to Europe, you'll see most of them looking at the same color. And also the pattern. So what you'll see above there, you see those blackish looking lines, and right below it is the idea of taking these ripples with the paving pattern so that it signifies the steps where the water came in and came out, and also the dynamic nature of the waves that's happening out in the water. I talked quite a bit about the rocks, and there are all the formations at the bottom. So we see recycling some of the granite that's out there, and also introducing new elements that speak to some of these rock formations, using them in some of the site furnishings and in some of the site signage. Legends. So there's all kinds of stories to be told, and what we found is the interpretive panels that have been an important part of Harbor Passage for the last 20 years. People really enjoy stopping and understanding, those stories. And especially the American tourists, when they come in, especially if there's a story that they can relate to. And we have a lot of them here in terms of like the ferry connections and all kinds of stories that relate to them, and also to the history of loyalists coming. And so great opportunity here to continue on and tell those stories. I've already talked about the slips, so here's what we look at doing, some sort of a marker that you could walk over and just sort of in a subtle way, identify. And you can see in this image on the bottom left the way the inundations were for the wharfs. And not just here, actually all along the waterfront and over on the south end as well. Wayfinding, we've been told from the cruise ship folks that people get off the ship and they need to be sort of guided around. So we have elements with signage that can lead them to the top destinations, and also our light pole fixtures will have a blue light around them so that they can follow the blue light along Harbor Passage to get to the boardwalk to carry on. This is a view from King Street looking down, and I think Chris had a better view a little higher up, but this shows how that view is opened up compared to what's out there today. So when you leave here, if you're heading in that direction, go up King Street, turn around and take a look back, and you're not going to see any of the water. Also, we think it's important to identify the entry points for that wayfinding, so we'll do that in different ways with the project. Also important to identify the various tide levels, because for someone who's only here for an hour or two, they don't recognize the dramatic change that happens out there that you see every day. So making that clear to people of the degree of water change. And what happens with the shipwrecks, and talk about the beacon that used to be out in the harbor to warn people of the dangers out in the harbor. And the story of Navy Island, how it was, I guess, evolved from a First Nations point of refuge to basically a pier for one of the bridges. So in terms of design programming, what happens in these spaces, we have a few slides here that shows you where activities can happen. So water access, so low tide, medium tide, and high tide, and extreme high tide. So getting right down to the water there. Also, the islands in orange here have a variety of treatments with furniture and landscape elements, but they're basically little bodies that work their way down to the water. Various sitting areas here in yellow, various forms of seating, and then in the next slide, capacity. People want to know how many people will this accommodate. So, we have a potential out there to have up to like 5,000 people out enjoying an opportunity there, but at the same time, a space that can be just for two. What else is on here? Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the market vendors that I mentioned, but there's also opportunities in the other pinkish purple color, for those of you that aren't colorblind, that provide flexible opportunities for a vendor or an art show or a performance on those spaces, and both informal and more programmed spaces, maybe buskers or something like that could happen in these areas. In the winter, the ice rink there is in that light bluish color, and then also lighting is important. So lighting for a seasonal effect in the winter to enhance that experience, and places to get out of the cold and get warm. Looking across the space, we've done some section views here, and we'll just go through those. And it gives you a little sense of, so this first one is if we looked right across the way and we're looking down to the water. So stage out here, skating rink, islands, Water Street as you go up. You can see the Market Square buildings in the background. Looking in the other direction, this is from King Street, looking down. The stage area, you can see a pedway in the background, and then sloping down and then into the patios. This section is a little farther over, and it's more at the top of the street, showing food vendors, beer garden, the islands, and Market Square, more at the top of the plaza. And down here at the tidal steps, this gives you a bit of an idea of how the transition and elevation can work in that space to create something that's interesting to look at, but also a great place to hang out. And in it, you'll see places like the cafe style sitting. Here we do show an elevated pedway, and then the rock pool to the right, or the water fountains. We've been exploring various ways to provide enclosure for the patio so that it can be more enjoyable and more for season. So we've looked at options here for glass enclosures that could open both in the walls and in the ceiling, and what they might look like inside. We've also been looking at less costly canvas, sort of more three-season types of facilities. And so we'll work through these details, and if you have any comments on any of these, we want to hear those tonight or in subsequent communication as we go through a process of selecting the most appropriate materials. In terms of lighting, we've incorporated this light, which is an intelligent light system. It actually has a number of modules. So not only is it an efficient lighting system, but it also incorporates things like speakers, Wi-Fi boosters, floodlights, but it does it in a very sleek way. What we were trying to do is create the mass style of light, so it's something easy to maintain, and then the other one is more of a decorative light, and we have that in the areas like around the ice skating area and also around the rock pool. This is a view from above looking at the lighting plan for the space. So you see it'll be well lit with a little bit of a darker spot in front of the stage so that the contrast will really allow the performers to jump out in the light. Going from the dark to the light, this is a lighting plan looking through the plaza. And here we are going along Harbor Passage with lighting and also floodlighting for effect. One of the spots we've incorporated lighting also is in the handrail, which is a slide coming up. Right there. So just putting a little bit of light under that rail to allow you better view at the edge of the water, and also something to help you in your navigation down Harbor Passage. All kinds of seating opportunities here. So someone mentioned, how about some benches with backs and armrests? Well, we have it all here, from platforms to backrests, all different types of forms. Some move, all fixed in place. And here we're going to now take you on a bit of a flyby through the entire site. So starting up the bottom of King Street, moving through the plaza, and I think it's moving into nighttime here now, but we see the performance stage with the plaza that can accommodate a couple thousand people, looking at the patios, maybe 500 people dining out in the patios, and then the other smaller intimate spaces, looking at the tidal steps here as a feature, and then we will work our way along Harbor Passage with some benches, and beside some of the benches, a spot for somebody who might be in a scooter or a wheelchair that can park beside their friend and enjoy the views, up the playful prow, and then the landscaped edge that leads you to this center point, which is an interesting place into Fundy Quay then as a gateway feature. So we end the presentation where we begin, at Harbor Passage kilometer 0, right out the door here. So here we're just sort of showing a little marker, a little selfie moment where you could step on some granite curbs and have a sit in the moon gate at the 0 point. So, final thoughts. We think the design that is presented here today is something that you asked for, which was contemporary. You wanted it to be casual and also accommodating in that it needs to be comfortable. So those were the 3 words that we used in the office. As you might expect, like anytime you build a house or whatever and you start with some ideas, right now we're a little over budget, and so we've got some work to do to see what aspects of this project we're going to keep and what can be trimmed, what can be reworked, how do we maintain as much of the design as possible, but get it within budget. So I'm very interested in your comments on that tonight or in future opportunities for consultation. The next steps on the project, we are getting ready to go to tender to do. The first step is to remove what's out there, so demolition. And so there's lots of antiquated electronics outside. Just walk around, look at all the cables and what's been done over the years to accommodate functionality. So we're going to improve all of that. So we're going to come in here and clear this out so that starting the spring, we can get under full construction. The idea would be to get these patios up and going as early next summer as possible. So the sequence pretty much follows the seawall sequence. So we'll start with the plaza and Harbor Passage where we can, following the seawall, and it will take a couple of years, to build all of this. So I guess finally, after all these false starts, there's money in the bank this time. So really excited to get going. You're going to see, a lot of change here very quickly. And we think the stars are aligned, this time to bring all these parts together with the public space, Harbor Passage, and Fundy Quay. So you have the elements of, you have the public space, which is the stage. You have Harbor Passage, which is the access. And you have Fundy Quay, which is, building that residential and commercial component right in the heart of this, gives you a built-in customer, and gives you a refurbished look, much like what happened after the Great Fire in terms of the architecture boom that went on here. That's what's happening here, and in a big way right now. So we'll be summarizing all the comments, and we'll be meeting with our committee and taking all these thoughts into consideration. There'll be opportunities for you to see these panels again. They're going to be displayed around the city. There's also going to be opportunity to comment on the website This presentation is being recorded, so there's an opportunity to watch it again, or maybe tell your friends, that they can have a watch it if they weren't able to get here tonight. So with that, thank you very much for your patience in this long presentation, but there's been so much to cover, really. We've been, quite busy with the complexity of the site,